Is the Domi Anderson trade a win or a loss for the Canadiens? And it's free agency week. That and more in this week's Hockey Inside Out. Welcome to this week's show, which is being brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal on Drummond Street. That's the one across the street from the Bell Center. Okay, joining us today once again is Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Resnack, and former Montreal Canadiens defenseman Rick Green. On Tuesday, the Canadiens announced that they traded Max Domi and a third-round pick to Columbus for forward Josh Anderson. Despite not being as much of a point producer as Domi, one thing that Anderson does have over him is size. For an absurd amount of time, the Canadiens have been a team made up of forwards who have averaged 5'9". So, with the addition of Anderson, it'll be nice to see that average climb to 5'9.5". Is Josh Anderson the power forward that the Canadiens have been seeking for years?
He could be if he's healthy. I mean, he's coming off shoulder surgery. He only played 26 games last season. He had one goal. The year before that, he was an offensive force. Marc Bergevin is banking on him being healthy. And if he is, and if he can play like he did 2 seasons ago, he's a guy, he's exactly what the Canadiens need. They need to get bigger up front. They need to have a physical presence in front of the net. They need somebody who can win puck battles in the corner. And he's one of those guys. If he's healthy, yeah, he's going to help this team. But it's a bit of a gamble. And I still think that they might miss Max Domi because, Marc Bergevin is banking on the 2 young defensemen, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi, playing for an entire season like they did during the 10 playoff games. There's no guarantee of that. But if they can, and if Josh Anderson is healthy, this is going to be a good move for the Canadiens.
I think it's a great acquisition, getting a guy 6'3", 220-pounder that, he's got a shot, he's got speed, and obviously he has a great physical part to his game, which Canadiens, need badly. And, his injury, from what I understand, has been repaired. He's 100%. He feels strong, and he's ready to be part of the organization. I think, judging by what he's been saying, also, he's really excited to be or have the opportunity to be part of the Montreal Canadiens group. He likes the team, so he's excited moving forward, and that's a bonus.
And Marc Bergevin has always said getting size doesn't come easy. So he got Josh Anderson, who's a little bit of damaged goods at the moment, but he's ready to redeem himself and show what he can do. He says he's 100% healthy, and we'll see what that's like when the season is able to begin. He did mention that if Columbus was able to move on during the playoffs, he was ready to go there. So that is really a good sign. And Marc Bergevin felt very confident that with everything that he saw, that he is healthy and will play. And it will be a huge bonus to the Montreal Canadiens because they desperately need this type of player. And it's been one that's been very hard to find.
Yeah, the question, of course, at this point, this taping on Thursday morning, is they still need to sign him. He's arbitration eligible as a restricted free agent. He could become an unrestricted free agent next season. The Blue Jackets wasted no time signing Max Domi to a 2-year, $10.6 million contract. So he's locked up. But I imagine, when Bergevin made the trade, or at least you hope so, that there's some kind of guarantees that they will be able to sign him.
What do you think some healthy expectations for Josh Anderson would be moving forward with next season?
Well, if you look at his 2018-19 season at 27 goals, 20 assists, I mean, the guy has the ability to score, and I think that's going to be a great addition, obviously, to the right side of the Canadiens. And, I like the element that we talked about before in what he brings to the team as far as a presence go. And a guy that's going to be able to get in the corners, push guys off the puck, get to the net. And he's also, able to make something happen on the offensive side. So, like Stu said, also, providing that he's healthy, I believe that he will be healthy, and he will be able to contribute in a very positive way to the team.
Yeah, we don't know what kind of line matchups or line setups that Claude Julien might do, but I mean, you look in the playoffs, and Suzuki and Drouin had some real nice chemistry together, and you think a big guy like Josh Anderson on the other wing, that could be a pretty effective line, a guy who can go to the net and win puck battles, as I mentioned earlier, with the 2 playmaker type guys, and that would help Josh Anderson also. He mentioned during the video conference call after the trade that one of the things he's really worked on since he joined the NHL is his shot, and he's got a very good shot right now.
Well, I think the thing that people have to remember is don't get caught up on his stats from last year, only having 4 points. Look at what he's been able to do in the past, and he has shown that he can be a goal scorer, and that's definitely something the Montreal Canadiens need. And if you kind of look about when Max Domi came to the Canadiens, when they traded for him with Alex Galchenyuk, Max Domi didn't have a very good year, and that was one of the reasons why Arizona was willing to part with him. And then he came to Montreal and really made a name for himself. And I think that's a very good possibility for Josh Anderson as well, to exceed people's expectations and show that he can still get back to the player that he was a few years ago.
The other thing with Anderson, I mean, fighting is coming out of hockey, thankfully. There's not as many as there are, but he is a guy who can fight. He is a physical presence, and he will protect his teammates, which is something the Canadiens haven't necessarily had that much in the past.
So overall, how would you rate this trade?
Well, it's two players who, as Max Domi said, they both needed a fresh start. Max Domi and Claude Julien's relationship had fallen apart. Max Domi didn't even want to talk about it during his video conference after the trade. He didn't want to be a fourth-line player here, obviously. Columbus thinks that he fits in well with their program. That's why they gave him over $10 million for 2 years. It's a fresh start for him, and it's a fresh start for Josh Anderson also. The Blue Jackets were reluctant to give him a contract that he wanted because of the injury. So it's two players that needed a fresh start. It's sort of ironic that they're also really good buddies. They were teammates together with the London Knights in junior. They said it's sort of bizarre being traded for each other. But it's a case of, as Max Domi said, he says all a player wants to do is be for a team who wants him. And now both of these players are with teams that want them.
Well, I think Domi realized that the writing was on the wall for him here with the Canadiens. He was not happy with them. Management was not happy either. So you don't want to keep a player like that on your team. It's not really going to be effective. So you have to look, what can we do now? And this was a good move for them where they needed to get size. Now, the only thing I have a question mark around this trade is, was there really a need for the Montreal Canadiens to have to throw in a third-round pick and send that to Columbus? To me, it could have just been player for player and not the extra draft pick.
I imagine though, Jess, other teams probably did offer player for player, and it came down to whichever team would throw in the draft pick. And that's one of the things Marc Bergevin and Trevor Timmons talked about this after the draft too. Collecting all these draft picks is not just a case of drafting these guys; it's also something in your back pocket if you need to finish a trade. So I guess maybe if they didn't throw in the third round pick, they don't get them. I would imagine that was the case.
Yeah, and I think judging by Domi's play, it was quite obvious that he wasn't happy. He was disappointed and frustrated in his lack of production, and he basically, almost became a player that was pouting. And I'm not sure what he brought in the dressing room, whether it was negativity, but I have to give full credit to Bergevin and say, you know what, we have a problem here that we need to remove from the dressing room from the standpoint of somebody that is a little more selfish than what we had anticipated, and put his name out there and made the move. And I like that type of way of doing business, and try and put as many happy guys as you can in the room that are going to really toe the line and pull on the rope the same way that they're going to need to do, to have success. So Josh Anderson, obviously remains to be seen, but I think his track record is a very positive one, and I think moving forward, we're going to have a nice surprise with him.
I give Domi credit too, though. As much as he didn't want to talk about Claude Julien, he also put blame on himself, saying that he let things bother him that he shouldn't have let bother him, and it was a learning experience for him. It's going to be interesting to see how him and John Tortorella get along in Columbus. I think it might work because I think they're both fiery personalities. I think it's one of those, if you look at the Tortorella during the playoffs and with Pierre-Luc Dubois, they had that screaming match on the bench, but I'm sure the next morning it was forgotten and over. I think Tortorella is one of those personalities where you can blow up and then let things slide the next day, and I think probably Max Domi is a similar type of situation. I don't know if Claude Julien is, and I don't think they were able to get over whatever the beef was they had. But that's going to be something interesting to watch next season with Max Domi in Columbus.
Yeah, I think it was a great trade. I think that it was obvious that Max Domi was finished mentally and emotionally with the Canadiens. And I could envision a scenario where they can't get rid of Domi and he ends up poisoning the locker room, or they get rid of him just because they have to for someone they don't really need, or just anyone they could sort of get. And they need someone like Josh Anderson in the lineup. He's a real addition. So I think it was a good trade.
It's bizarre, though, as I wrote in the column this week, is why do all these Canadian sort of star players end up leaving on bad terms. You know, Max Pacioretty, Alexander Radulov, Markov, and now Domi. It seems to get personal for some reason. It's hard to understand. You need to separate business and personal stuff. And the Canadiens, with Marc Bergevin at the helm, don't seem to be able to do that. And all these guys leave on bad terms. Well, that gets around the league, and other players talk too. And when you talk about players not wanting to come to Montreal, I think that's something that factors in.
And you know what? Dealing with the egos of today's athletes is really difficult. And, you know, the expectations for a lot of them is you give me, I don't necessarily earn it, but you give it to me no matter what. And that's a tough situation, and one that I think management has to be really hard on when it comes down to identifying that problem area and trying to rid your organization of guys like that. And, you know, I think this was a case where we probably don't know all of the particulars, but I'm sure that Domi was disappointed whether he was playing the wing or whether he was playing center, wasn't playing enough. He was using all kinds of, you know, excuses for him not doing and missing out on his production. But they didn't waste any time saying, okay, we have a problem. Let's try and improve our team by moving them along and life in the business.
I get the sense that this was one of those scenarios where Domi maybe had a bigger ego than, let's say, Radulov or Markov, but you never know. Sorry?
Or Bergevin.
There you go. He needs to have the biggest. He wasn't part of Bergie's buddies, I can tell you that. You know what I mean? With the first-round pick at this year's draft, the Canadiens selected defenseman Kaden Guhle. What kind of player is Guhle, and do you think he will one day be a bona fide NHLer?
From what I understand and hearing bits and pieces about him, I think he's obviously was the best player available at that particular time. And they jumped on him as a character kid with great upside with his mobility and his tough to play against type of mentality. And I think that, you know, whenever you have an opportunity to get a player like this, he's got good size, he's got grit, he's a character kid. And that's something that you want to put in your dressing room because it's nothing but good things happen when you surround the rest of your dressing room with guys like that. So you know, I'm excited for the young man, and you know, obviously it remains to be seen. But from what we're seeing and what we're hearing, there's a very much upside to this potential player.
And you want to have a big defenseman who does have a little bit of that mean streak, but you also want him to be able to be mobile. That's, I think, has been a big problem, is if you get a big defenseman who can't really skate all that well, he's not really doing too much for you. And it looks like Guhle is going to be a player that will have all that, be able to skate, have that mean streak. And as you mentioned, he's a character guy, so he's someone that will fit in well with the Canadiens' dressing room. I also like the fact that he said his junior coach right now is the same junior coach that Shea Weber had. So perhaps he can help mold Guhle into being a Shea Weber 2.0.
Yeah, kudos to Canadiens for picking, obviously, who they thought was just the best player on their list. I mean, there's going to be a lot of criticism about not selecting the Quebec kid, Lapierre. And if Lapierre goes on to become a star, then we'll hear about it even more. But, you know, there's injury issues with him, which probably scared the Canadiens off. But, you know, Marc Bergevin kept talking about the character of Guhle. And that's a thing I think the Canadiens have learned from their previous first-round draft picks. You look at Nathan Beaulieu and Galchenyuk and some of the guys who didn't work out. They're maybe a little bit immature. This kid seems to be a mature kid. When you heard him speaking after the draft, he came across as a bright kid. He has just said he can skate, which is the key in today's NHL. He's got a little bit of a mean streak in him. But I mean, you know, the draft is a crapshoot, and you know, hopefully this works out for the kid. I like the way he spoke about how he's planning to go. You know, he expects to play 2 more years of junior hockey, develop down there, and then move to the pro. So he's a kid who seems to have his head screwed on right. He seems to be a bright kid. And before the draft, Trevor Timmons, I asked him a question. I said, what's the biggest lesson you've learned during your 17 years scouting players for the Canadiens? And that's what he said. He says, we realize just the importance of character and making sure that these kids are smart and wanting to do all the work they have to do after being drafted. You know, we brought up Brendan Gallagher about, you know, there's a perfect example of a kid who got drafted, 4th round or 5th round. I can't remember. I think it was 4th. And did all the work after that to make it to the NHL. So it sounds like this kid Guhle is one of those kids. So it seems to me at this point like a good pick. But as Trevor Timmons says, Alaska is in 4 years.
And it is a challenge, and it is a challenge to the organization because their first rounders, from a development standpoint, have struggled. And hopefully they've learned from the past that it's very, very critical to get these guys, when they do get them, to handle them the right way and try and bring them along, so that it allows them to not lose confidence and become bona fide, real good defensemen in the league. So that's a challenge moving forward that the organization will seriously have to look at and make sure that it's handled the right way, so they don't run into a situation like they did with Tenorti and Beaulieu and a number of other first rounders.
Well, I think it was good too that Mark Bergevin sort of made it clear that he's not going to be joining the Canadiens next year, that they're going to give him time to develop. And I think maybe that was a problem in the past, to say, well, if he makes us make a difficult decision, then maybe that's a little bit more pressure on these young players to say, oh, I could have an opportunity to make the team now. So I think it's better to sort of take the foot off the pedal when it comes to these young players and give them time to develop properly.
When free agency begins on Friday, do you see GM Marc Bergevin being an active player?
I see like every other year, to be perfectly honest. I find Marc Bergevin has a lot of trouble trying to get good free agents to come to Montreal. Now, it might be a little bit of a different situation because the cap will not be going up the way that it usually does. But, Marc Bergevin doesn't make big moves when it comes to free agency, and I don't necessarily think this year will be any different.
It was interesting. Darren Dreger was saying on, I think it was Edmonton radio, that Taylor Hall, the Canadiens are one of the 3 teams he thinks are in the running for him, which is quite interesting. And if the Canadiens could get Taylor Hall, wow, all of a sudden this is a pretty good looking hockey team compared to what we had last year. He's exactly what the Canadiens have been missing, a natural scorer, a natural offensive player, a former Hart Trophy winner. So I wouldn't bet on it happening. But it was sort of interesting that Dreger said the Canadiens are one of the 3 teams in the running. And I think, as I wrote a column last week, the time is now. This is a perfect opportunity for Marc Bergevin to make a big move like this. Unlike a lot of other GMs, he has cap room. I think if he can get him, you have to try and get him. I think that would all of a sudden make the Canadiens a really solid hockey team.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that point. I mean, Taylor Hall, would he look great in the Canadiens uniform? Would he be the kind of guy that could really make things happen and contribute, offensively and make the team better? And hopefully those discussions are happening and they find a way to land them. But it's tough, and the track record speaks for itself. It's really hard to get guys on the free agent market to get to Montreal, but you never know.
The interesting thing with Hall is he's played in a big Canadian market before in Edmonton, so he understands everything that comes with it. And he might be one of those guys who likes it, who likes the attention rather than being out in Arizona or somewhere nobody knows who you are. So that might work in the Canadiens' favor. And also, Taylor Hall's he wants to win, and he's looking at the changes, Josh Anderson and some of the moves that Marc Bergevin has made, and it makes the Canadiens maybe a little bit more appealing for a free agent like Taylor Hall to want to come here.
Ooh, that would be thrilling, huh? Make it happen, Bergie. Find a way. Make it happen. All right, I think that's all the time that we have for this week's show, which has been brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal. That's the one across the street from the Bell Center. What are your thoughts on the Domi Anderson trade? Let us know in the comments section below. My name is Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next week.